All right, this is Guy Eagle with Renewable Wisdom Trails, Cosmology and Library and Living Library. The question that is being thrown around is, how does this knowledge, how can it help us with the current events out there? And without going into throwing opinions around on what the current events are, we're talking about how to stay sane or centered without getting too activated, where our lives are being influenced and changed daily. And this is where those principles kind of come in, and they're not easy to practice, so I'm a little hesitant how deep we're going to go with this. But the point is that if we can find ways to stay centered with all the four worlds out there, then we can view our human condition with a little bit of humor and a little bit of detachment. So we had yesterday, or somewhere back there, we did a overview of the 20 count. And we started with 11 and 1 being above the fires, 11 being the stars and suns that are fires, and 1 being the individual fires, whether it be a physical body or our sun. The principle or the law nature goes by with the sun is inclusiveness. The sun has a way that it shines on everything that exists on the earth, whether it's in shadows or not. And if we can just take and practice some inclusiveness in our life, now this is a controversial term these days, but it's still there. We are part of a larger family, and we start to have an orientation to being part of a larger family rather than one species family. So how I have to do it is when I take my walks in the morning or at night when I go out to say my thanks for the day, I'm looking around and I'm looking, well, how's this animal living with this inclusiveness? How's this animal living with the cold or the changes in their habitat? Or the bulldozers going down the road, making a new road through where they used to live. How are they dealing with this? What's their wisdom that I can learn from? I got to include their behavior as part of my wisdom. I got to see how the trees are reacting to the changes in the weather. I got to see how the insects are doing it. I got to look at how the way the snow is running. I got to look for the wisdom in the commons of everyday experiences rather than on the news feeds. That's what inclusiveness is about. The second principle that works with the 12 and 2 is about Mother Earth. It's about co-creation. I have to look around and see how the trees are co-creating with weather changes. How are they creating when a habitat is knocked down? Is their pollens changing the direction the wind is taking it? How are they reproducing? What's their wisdom to survive? The animals, the rocks, what's going on with them? I have to be part of this bigger family and see where I'm going to participate, and start to make my daily decisions based on staying in relationship to those things that are going on. Doesn't mean I ignore what's going on in the human world. It just means I'm bigger than just that. That helps me stay centered. But I also use those walks as a workout. Sometimes I run, sometimes I have a backpack on so I'm carrying extra weight. Sometimes I have a walking stick so I can poke around when I'm crossing the streams. And I use that as a way of connecting to the trees, because the walking stick is made out of wood. I do these things to think about the decisions I'm going to make. 13 and 3, which is about waters and the plant world, it's about being expansive. If I am feeling my connection to the natural world out there, my awareness should be expanding. If I'm only thinking about myself in my relationship, usually I'm contracting. I'm getting smaller. My opinions are getting tightened up. My likes and dislikes are tightening up. They're not being expansive and seeing that every species or every individual is doing what they are being called to do. Now that isn't a religious concept. Whether you know that you're being called or you don't know that you're being called, you're still influenced by the wind, the air, the water you drink, the breaths you take, the land you walk on. Those influences are there all the time. In fact, a lot of tribes talk about the seasons are your ancestors. I mean, once they cross over, they just go back out and become the seasons, the colors of the seasons. And they're always there teaching you. So I just started to recognize that. That helps me stay more expansive and see the current events of how limited it is. The 14 and 4, which has a lot to do with the animal world, that principle is about movement gives truth. Truth gives movement. You can say it either way. That's an interesting one, because I talked about in a previous video about more movement, more truth. And, I really had to prove this out in the martial art practice. And now I can do it out in nature. But I had to do it in some of my current daily activities first. I had to watch my conversations with people to see if I was really being opinionated. Usually the conversation would get smaller. If I was being open and imaginative in some way, the conversation would be broader. It would have more hope. It would have more possibilities. And therefore I'd get more movement. Now in martial arts, they taught us that about kicking and blocking and striking. And what you learn to do is focus your energy. The more you could focus, the better strike you could have, because you were just manipulating the energy flow. There's other ways to learn that, but that's the general flavor of that principle of learning. When you're out in nature, look for the movement, go with it. If the wind's too strong, get out of the way a little bit. Get out of, behind a tree. But don't quit monitoring it. Be aware of its presence. Anyway, that's the first 4 of the principles. We're going to take a little break and come back and touch on a few more. Make weights. Thank you.